HaLeigh Cummings vanished from her own home, and no one can remember the last time they saw her. At just 5 years old, HaLeigh couldn't have gotten out of bed on her own in the middle of the night. But by morning, her bed was empty. No signs of forced entry, no strange noises in the night. And the strangest part, the only adult in the house said she slept through the whole thing. Misty Croslin, her father's 17-year-old girlfriend, was the last known person with HaLeigh that night. But what she told police changed at least 3 times. The more you hear it, the less it makes sense. For years, every time a new lead surfaced, it seemed to come from Misty. And each time, it contradicted her own previous story. As for HaLeigh, no one ever saw her again. No body, no DNA. Just one haunting question that keeps repeating with no answer. How does a 5-year-old disappear into silence from her own home, and no one knows what happened? Before her name was taped to street poles and flashed across every TV screen in America, HaLeigh Cummings was just a 5-year-old girl in Satsuma, Florida.
You have to tell me what you know.
A quiet, rural town where bad things
I already told you.
She had big brown eyes, long brown hair, and a smile that made people want to protect her. HaLeigh lived with her father, Ronald Cummings, a night shift worker at a local engineering company. Her biological mother was no longer in the picture. Instead, the one changing her diapers, walking her to school, and cooking her dinner was Misty Croslin, a 17-year-old girl. It wasn't what most people would call a traditional family. But in Satsuma, that wasn't unusual. It was a working-class community where folks leaned on each other just to get by. Some said Misty was like a big sister to the kids. Others said she was still a kid herself, one who liked to party and kept secrets Ronald never knew about. The night HaLeigh disappeared, Misty was the only adult home with the children, HaLeigh and her 3-year-old brother. Police asked Misty, "Where were you sleeping?" She said, "On the couch." "Did you hear anything?" She said, "No." "Did you lock the doors?" "Yes." "Did anyone come to the house?" "No." Every answer was no. But the very next day, Misty changed her story. She said she got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night and saw the back door slightly open. Maybe someone had come in. A week later, her story shifted again. Now, she said maybe her own brother and cousin had snuck into the house, that they were looking for something, and when they couldn't find it, they took HaLeigh instead. Each version of Misty's story was like a broken mirror, reflecting pieces of the truth, but none of them fitting together. And while everyone focused on Misty's changing stories, there was something most people overlooked. HaLeigh had a brain disorder. She needed medication every single day. Without it, she'd suffer seizures. Her body would shut down. So if she'd wandered off on her own, that wasn't possible. And if someone took her, without bringing her medicine, they weren't planning to bring her back. There's one thing even her family didn't know about HaLeigh, and it might be the reason she was never found. It was February 9th, 2009, a Monday like any other in Satsuma, Florida. Ronald Cummings, HaLeigh's father, headed out for his usual night shift. Before leaving, he asked Misty to watch the kids. HaLeigh was 5. Her little brother, Ronald Jr., was just 3. Misty, only 17, was the oldest person in the house that night. She later told police she fed the kids dinner, gave them a bath, then put them to bed. She said she fell asleep on the living room couch. The house was quiet. No strange sounds. No doors opening. Nothing. By 3:30 the next morning, Misty was on the phone with 911. Her voice in the call is panicked, gasping for air. "I just woke up and the back door's wide open, and the 5-year-old is gone from her bed." The dispatcher asked, "Are you sure she went to sleep last night?" Misty replied, "Absolutely. I put her to bed, then I went to sleep in the living room. No one else was here." Police arrived within minutes, but from the very first moment, something felt off. There were no signs of forced entry, no muddy footprints, no broken locks. No neighbors heard anything, and the houses were just feet apart. Inside, nothing was disturbed. HaLeigh's bed was made. No signs of a struggle. No screams. Not even her little brother heard a thing. When Ronald returned and heard what had happened, he exploded. "My daughter wouldn't leave in the middle of the night. Somebody took her, and if y'all don't do something, I will." He punched the wall so hard, his knuckles split open. Outside, neighbors and locals started gathering. People were stunned. No one imagined HaLeigh would be the next child to disappear. A massive search began that very day. Over 100 volunteers combed the woods and swamps surrounding Satsuma. Dive teams scanned the riverbanks. Helicopters swept overhead, but they found nothing. No shoes, no hair, no blood, no witnesses. And slowly, investigators turned their focus back toward the house. And their attention landed on Misty. In those first hours, police believed her. She was young, shaken, terrified. Who would lie in a moment like that? But then, small details started to fall out of place. When asked again, "Where did you sleep?" Misty now said, "In the bedroom, with the kids." But before, she'd said the sofa. Same night, two different stories. They asked, "Was the back door broken into or open from inside?" Misty, "I don't know, I just saw it open." But later, she said, "I'm sure I locked it before bed." Detectives began writing down everything Misty said, and everything she didn't. There was one thing she never mentioned, not until they asked, "Did anyone come to the house that night?" She paused, then said, "No, nobody." But a few days later, in another interview, Misty changed her story again. She now claimed her brother, Tommy, and a cousin, Joe Overstreet, had stopped by. They were looking for a gun. They didn't find it, and they were angry. Then Misty said something that made the entire room go silent. "Maybe they took HaLeigh as a way to scare me." The officer asked, "Did you see that happen?" Misty shook her head. "No, I'm just guessing." When Ronald heard this, he was furious. The woman he trusted to protect his daughter had hidden the fact that strange men were in the house the night she vanished. To Ronald, it wasn't just betrayal. It was unthinkable. Police, however, moved carefully. Misty was 17. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she'd been threatened. Or maybe she was hiding something far worse. They gave her a polygraph test. She failed. Her strongest reactions came when asked if she knew what happened to HaLeigh. In the public's eyes, Misty quickly shifted from a victim to the keeper of a secret. But there was no proof, no witness, no camera, no physical evidence. All they had was a story that changed every time she told it. Each version pulled investigators deeper into a maze. The deeper they went, the darker it got. But if Misty was telling the truth, if someone really did come looking for a gun, then the bigger question is, why was a weapon worth more than a child? In any missing person case, detectives believe there is one truth and a dozen lies wrapped around it. The disappearance of HaLeigh Cummings was no different. The problem was, none of the lies matched. It started with Misty. After suggesting her relatives may have come looking for a gun, Misty kept changing her story. By her fourth police interview, she now claimed that Joe Overstreet, her cousin from Tennessee, had flown into a rage when he couldn't find his grandfather's gun. She said he held her at knife point. He couldn't find the gun, Misty told investigators. So he said, "I'll take something else instead." Then he walked into the bedroom, picked up HaLeigh, and left. The officers asked, "Why didn't you tell us this sooner?" Misty said nothing, then whispered, "I was scared." Her brother, Tommy Croslin, told a different version. He claimed he wasn't even there that night, said he was home with his wife and could prove it. But his wife contradicted him. He left that night. I don't know where he went. Joe Overstreet, the one now accused, denied everything. "I never went in the bedroom," he told police. "I don't know anything about a gun. I was just visiting family for a few days and then went back to Tennessee." Joe took a polygraph. The results? Inconclusive. He didn't pass, but it wasn't enough to charge him with anything. As stories collided like cracks in a mirror, someone unexpected stepped forward with a new version of events. Misty's grandmother, Flora Hollers. She told reporters she knew what happened to HaLeigh. In a phone interview, her voice trembling, she said, "Misty knows, Tommy knows, Joe knows. They hid that child. They put her in the water, near the river." She sounded like she was crying as she spoke. "I love my grandkids, but I can't keep this secret anymore." She wasn't there the night it happened, but claimed her grandkids had confessed to her. Immediately, police began digging along the riverbanks, ponds, and swamps across Putnam County. They brought in K-9 units, sonar tech, divers. They found nothing. No HaLeigh, no remains. Just mud and fog. When every story contradicts the last, sometimes the closest thing to truth comes from someone nobody expects. In this case, that person was HaLeigh's own father. From the very beginning, Ronald Cummings suspected Misty was hiding something. But he had loved her. He had trusted her with his daughter. And that betrayal was eating him alive. He told the media, "I don't believe Misty did anything to hurt HaLeigh, but I know she knows what happened. And that's worse, because she won't say." As detectives retraced Misty's timeline, they discovered something troubling. A 2-hour gap between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. that Misty could never fully explain. No one knew what she was doing, where she went, or whether she was even asleep. And that opened up a chilling possibility. Misty wasn't just a witness that night. She may have made the most important decision of all. Police quietly pulled Misty's phone records. During that unaccounted-for window, 2 calls came in, both from a man named Greg Page. He had a criminal record and a history with Misty. Greg denied any involvement, and the police didn't have enough to force a confession. The questions returned to Misty, and once again, there were no answers. Meanwhile, one strange detail had been overlooked for years: HaLeigh's pajama top. The night she vanished, Misty said HaLeigh had gone to bed in a pink shirt. But school surveillance showed HaLeigh walking home that day in a white shirt. No one ever saw the pink shirt. Not in the house, not along the road, not in any evidence recovered. Only Misty talked about it, almost like she was trying to implant a specific image into people's minds to overwrite the real one. Little things like that, a missing shirt, a strange phone call, a vague answer, they become whispers in a dark room. Not quite lies, not quite truth, just shadows. Then, out of nowhere, a new version surfaced. Again, in 2023, in a rare interview, Misty changed her story for the 5th time. This time, she said, I saw what happened. I know who did it, but I can't say. At this point, the question wasn't who did it. It was, why has Misty always stood at the edge of the truth, but never stepped all the way in? 3 years after HaLeigh vanished, the investigation was at a standstill. Misty kept offering vague stories. Her father, Ronald, grew quiet, avoiding the media. And the people under suspicion? They went on living, as if nothing had ever happened. Then, a surprising twist. Not from new evidence, but from an entirely different crime. In 2010, Misty Croslin and her brother Tommy were arrested in an undercover sting for drug trafficking. Police had been watching them for months. Soon after his arrest, Tommy's tone changed. In a recorded interrogation, he said, I know where HaLeigh was hidden. I can take you there. Detectives held their breath. Tommy claimed that Joe Overstreet, the cousin from Tennessee, was the one who did it. That Joe had killed HaLeigh and dumped her in the river. That river was the St. John's, a long, deep, fast-moving body of water just outside Satsuma. Under police escort, Tommy led officers to the riverbank. K-9 units were released. Divers plunged into the current. Sonar scanned the riverbed, but nothing turned up. No clothing, no bones, no DNA. Back in the interrogation room, Tommy's voice fell quiet. I was just trying to help. I thought that was the place. I'm not sure anymore. Joe Overstreet was called in again. He repeated, I'm innocent. I didn't even know that little girl. Everyone's just looking for someone to blame. His lawyer added, there's no evidence, no physical proof, no eyewitness, just the word of a man trying to shave time off a drug sentence. And that was true. All they had was the statement of a man facing prison, hoping for a deal. Police went silent once more, and HaLeigh's family returned to the same cycle: hope, disappointment, and emptiness. 3 years gone, and the truth remained like the waters of the St. John's, flat, endless, and silent. After the failed river search, public trust in the investigation began to fracture. Each time police said they were getting close, the truth seemed to drift further away. The media spotlight turned back to Misty, the 17-year-old babysitter at the center of a national disappearance. Every headline, every comment, every glance asked the same question. What is she hiding? But Misty was no longer just a witness. She was now a defendant. After her drug conviction, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison, a sentence that shocked even her defense attorney. Because Tommy, her brother, with the same charge, got just 15 years. Others with worse records got less. But Misty, just 18, with no prior convictions, was hit with one of the harshest sentences possible. Many believed this wasn't just punishment for drugs. It was punishment for silence, a consequence for not telling the truth about HaLeigh. One journalist wrote, Misty wasn't convicted for HaLeigh's disappearance, but she's serving time for the answer she wouldn't give. In prison, Misty continued to be questioned. Every few years, another taped interview, another version, another truth. In 2012, she said, I didn't hurt HaLeigh, but I know who did. In 2015, she said, "I don't know for sure what happened. I was high that night. I was hazy. I remember water, screaming, then nothing." Then, in 2023, during a short interview with an independent journalist, Misty whispered one final line. "Someone else knows more than me, but they've never spent a day in prison." That statement sparked a new wave of suspicion. What if Misty had been the one paying for someone else's crime? What if she'd been pushed to the front to shield another person, another motive, one the public never saw? Justice may have ended up in the wrong hands. And if every theory we've ever believed is wrong, then maybe the person no one suspected was the one behind it all. By the time every theory had been repeated over and over, Misty, Tommy, Joe, the intruder, the missing gun, the public began to realize something disturbing. Not one person had ever been charged in HaLeigh's case. No one indicted for kidnapping. No one convicted of murder. No one for nearly 15 years. And that was the biggest gap in this entire story. The FBI once stated, "We believe HaLeigh is no longer alive." But when pressed for why, their response was vague, based on elements in the investigation. No details, no explanation. Then came an unexpected twist, this time involving HaLeigh's own father. Ronald Cummings was arrested for trafficking ecstasy and oxycodone. It was hard for many to believe. The same father who had once wept on camera, vowing to kill anyone who hurt his daughter, was now in handcuffs for the very drugs that had pulled Misty under. Some observers began asking the unspoken question, what if something happened that night involving drugs, an accident, a reaction, and afterward, a cover-up? Because the idea that a 5-year-old child could vanish without leaving a single trace was almost impossible. Unless it wasn't a kidnapping at all. Unless something happened inside that house. Years later, retired investigators privately admitted, "We believe HaLeigh may have died accidentally, and her body was hidden to avoid consequences." But here's the legal problem. No body, no murder charge. So suspicion spread everywhere. Misty, Ronald, Tommy, even the grandmother, neighbors, friends, townsfolk. Everyone became a possible link in a growing chain of silence. The case lost its center. No longer about a missing little girl. It had become a maze of adults tangled in fear, guilt, and doubt. And in that maze, HaLeigh's voice, the one voice that truly mattered, began to fade away. One of the strangest and most overlooked details was this. HaLeigh's little brother, Ronald Jr., was just 3 years old at the time. During child-appropriate questioning, police asked him, "Who was the last person in the room with HaLeigh?" And he answered, "A man, not daddy, not grandpa." When asked to describe more, he simply scribbled a picture of a hat. Police couldn't draw any solid conclusions, but the family was shaken, because Joe Overstreet was known to wear baseball caps during his visits. Still, it wasn't enough. Too vague, too fragile. You can't convict based on a toddler's memory. But that detail, like so many others, never left the case file. Just like one more chilling claim from a fellow inmate who shared a prison block with Misty in 2011. She said Misty had whispered to her, "HaLeigh wasn't breathing. They told me to stay quiet, or I'd disappear too." The tip was passed on to detectives, but the woman had a long history of lying. Once again, not enough to move forward. It was as if every clue hovered just on the edge of truth. Never quite verifiable, never fully false. A world of half-truths. Just enough to keep you awake at night, but never enough to bring justice. Then, in a 2022 podcast, an independent journalist floated a theory that chilled even seasoned listeners. What if Misty didn't take HaLeigh? What if she woke up that night and found that HaLeigh had already stopped breathing? A reaction, an overdose, an accident. And in that moment of panic, instead of calling 911, she called someone else to help hide the body. The theory has never been confirmed, but it explains what nothing else can. No sound, no struggle, no DNA, no evidence. Only a little girl who disappeared in silence, and a teenage girl who may carry the secret forever, even if she's never charged. So what if the truth is this? No one kidnapped HaLeigh. What if it was just one tragic night, and a chain of frightened people who chose silence over the truth? February 2024 marked exactly 15 years since HaLeigh Cummings disappeared. No body, no conviction, no headstone, just an empty space inside a small house in Satsuma, Florida, where a 5-year-old girl once had her bedroom. Misty Croslin remains incarcerated at the Florida Correctional Facility. She won't be eligible for parole until 2034. In every recent interview with the press, Misty has repeated just one line: "I pray every day for HaLeigh. There's nothing more I can say." Ronald Cummings, HaLeigh's father, is also serving time. No one in the family appears on TV anymore. There are no memorials, no anniversary specials. The story has quietly faded away. But somewhere, hidden in all the almosts, the half-truths, the midnight phone calls no one talks about, there is still something waiting to be uncovered. Something simple or cruel. Maybe HaLeigh really did die that night, in an accident, or something far worse. Or maybe she's still alive, living under a new name in a different state, raised by someone who believes they did the right thing. We don't know, and maybe we never will. But if there's one thing that's absolutely certain, it's that HaLeigh Cummings should not have vanished like this. She shouldn't be forgotten, buried beneath 15 years of silence. She shouldn't be erased by lies told so many times. They almost sound like truth. In this case, silence wasn't just a detail. It was the core. And sometimes, justice doesn't fail because of a lack of evidence, but because too many people chose to stay silent all at once.